Welcome to Why We Play. This is the official video game podcast talking about the history of why people play from Fandom Foundry. I'm Todd Oxtra, your host, joined by Captain Logan, a man with no last name. He's mysterious, and no one will ever know. If somebody did, they're
Nope.
dead. Well, Captain Logan, I've known for a while, mainly because of the Xbox expansion pass, but you really are established through the Keel Hauled podcast. You're part of that dirty pirate life that you love so much with the Sea of Thieves. It was funny. I talked to CJ and he's like, yeah, I'm all in this. Yeah, Captain Logan, no. I'm like, it's kind of nice to have that community where people from all different ends of the world are part of something bigger, and that's you and Sea of Thieves. And the reason I had you on was because I think a lot of people don't really know about your history outside of XCP, or they know you in Keel Hauled, but it's kind of like bringing everything together as a whole gamer.
Yeah.
So it's kind of nice to have that. So if anybody doesn't know you, Logan, let's introduce. By the way, my son's name is Logan, but it's AN, so it's a
Yeah.
little bit different. So I love that. So let's start about your gaming. What caused you to really get into the hobby? Typically, somebody has a story about maybe someone that got them into the hobby, maybe a gift or something like that. What is your gaming origin story?
So that would probably go all the way back to probably 1989. Because I remember my seventh birthday was when it all kind of started. And I want to say that it was probably a little bit before that, but really when it kind of kicked off was with my first video game console, the Nintendo Entertainment System. So that was like the first thing. I remember being carted around to Texas from Arizona to go visit my family on my dad's side, and we were having a birthday, and we were just going out there because it was July, and we wanted to go visit some family. So I remember for my birthday, I got a bunch of gifts, but one of my aunts had actually given me a Nintendo, and I kind of knew about it, and I didn't really know like a whole lot about it, but I really remember my dad being excited and us setting it up and me getting to kind of sit down with the controller and kind of figure out what Duck Hunt and Mario Brothers was. So, and I really fell in love with Duck Hunt. That was fun. 'Cause I'd had like the experience of like playing toy guns and stuff like that in the past, but Mario was just this unique thing. It's like when you've never played a video game before and you sit down and you play your first video game, you're just like trying to work out what was going on. And there was a lot of deaths. And the little mushroom guys at the time that I didn't know their name were like the bane of my existence. And I was scared to jump on shells and stuff. And it just kind of started off with watching my dad and then me kind of sit there and play on the NES. And then by the time we got home, he my parents had bought a small like little 13-inch Zenith TV, and it was on the nightstand or like the dresser for my dad, because he was like, oh, I want to watch sports and stuff while I'm in bed. If my mom was going to be watching TV or shows in the living room, he wanted to be able to watch TV there. So
Mhm.
I had to wait for him to be okay with me going into their bedroom and sitting on their bed and playing Duck Hunt and Mario on the NES in there. So I'm sitting there as a kid just with my little zapper gun back before they had like changed it to the orange version of it. It was like the
Oh,
OG
yep.
gray one before they'd done anything to kind of indicate like this is a toy. And it was one of those situations where I remember playing Duck Hunt many an hour, and just it was the gun against the glass, and that was how I beat Duck Hunt as a kid. And my claim to fame was that I beat that game without ever losing a life, regardless of how close I was to the actual screen. That part doesn't factor in. It was whether you beat it without any losing a life.
No one needs to know that you were, directly on the TV.
Yeah.
the fact that that stupid little dog didn't, mock you was a win all in itself.
Yeah, it was a good match. But I distinctly remember like that was kind of my first experience, and that was kind of where I think a lot of rental stores kind of came into play. At
Mhm.
like that was when I was really because like I knew that rental stores existed, but I never thought about their names or anything. And we lived in an area where we didn't have blockbusters or Hollywood videos in the middle of Phoenix. Like we had little mom and pop shops and stuff. And I remember like growing up, I would go with my dad and he would want to go and like pick out different games. I love the duck hunt. It's awesome. But that dog was always, he would kind of greet you and he would be your pal until you missed. And then he would mock you and you'd be like, okay, well, I don't think I like this game anymore.
Oh, and it gets fast, and you've got a lot of them, and it just gets more ridiculous.
Yeah.
And so I was thinking about this. So 1989, how old were you?
I would have been 7.
7. Okay. So it sounds like the kids probably didn't have it yet, maybe because it just didn't fit in their budget. Maybe mom and dad didn't spring for it. Video games were still kind of not in the curve. But you didn't have any friends talking in elementary school like, "Oh, NES." Was that anything that happened?
No, that was the wild thing is that growing up, I was really the only one up until about like 6th grade, I would say, before we moved to a different part of the Phoenix. I really didn't talk to anyone about video games. It was just kind of like me being an only child and my dad having uh like the NES, and then that was, he would go play golf and stuff. But I do remember, like, I live near a cul-de-sac. I lived on a corner, and I do remember there was one family that had like this big long chain link fence that they'd have to roll out every time they wanted to take their car out. And I used to go get babysat over at their place, so I'd have to like try and drag the actual gate open, which was very heavy for me at the time.
Yeah.
But I remember that they had a Sega, and I was like, I had no clue what a Sega was. And I was very confused about why I could play games on their system. And it was mostly Sonic. And that was where I started to learn about like going into the water and looking for air bubbles, which does not translate into Mario.
No.
There's no
No.
bubbles in Mario. And that
Yeah.
was very disturbing as well, too. But I also didn't
You
have to
could
worry
breathe
about it.
underwater in Mario,
Yeah.
which was just kind of crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. So having to figure out like that there was breath and stuff like that in Sonic was very disturbing. But I do remember like that was the only other exposure that I had to video games was this other family that lived near me that had that actually had like a Sega Genesis. And then I think a couple years later I met another kid who happened to have like an NES as well. And that's when I found out about like Metroid and Adventures of Lolo. Those were like the two games that I remember him having that I went over to go play that we couldn't share the games. Like we could come
No.
over and play, but we couldn't actually give them to the other kids. And there's probably good reason for that.
It's kind of funny how everybody knows probably somebody that had a video game system that you're like, wait, you've got that video game system? My
Mm.
cousin had a ColecoVision. My other
Oh
cousin
wow.
had an Intellivision. And it was like, I'm like, I thought it was such a cool novelty, but they were obviously not superior to like the Atari 2600 was far more common.
Hmm.
And then like even like I had a Commodore 128, but the Commodore
Oh wow.
64 was the system you got because your buddy's dad probably had a buddy who copied all the games on the diskettes, and that's what my dad did. He worked at
Mm.
GM, and every time he'd bring, oh, my buddy's got these games, you're going to play it. Some were questionable, but still, it was kind of the
Yeah.
most common system of the time. So the fact that at least you had the Genesis and the Nintendo, not like the Master System. I had a buddy had the Master System too. Not a great system. So
That
um,
was, yeah, growing up I had no clue what the Master System was. And it wasn't until like way later in life that I was like, wait, there's not a system before the Genesis. It started with the Genesis.
no, there was Alex Kidd was like their mascot. I'm like, Alex Kidd? Who is that?
Yeah. Yes.
Seems like a knockoff or something.
But I feel like that was kind of the power of marketing because I remember like when I was growing up and stuff like that, I always saw advertisements for Sonic and Sega and Altered Beast, and that was what was kind of prevalent. Or like Mario, and gosh, what was some of the other games? I was like Goonies 2 for some reason, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and I could never figure out why I could never rent Goonies 1 growing up, and it never dawned on me that they made a sequel to the movie and they just never had a sequel or a beginning game.
Nobody made a novelization of the game, unfortunately. So that
Yeah.
great plot is still on the scrap heap. Goonies too. Who's left? The Fratellis are all gone in jail. So I am curious now. I have to look up the fan fiction of Goonies 2 to really satisfy my my love of that franchise.
Yeah, I just remember there being I just remember there being like a mermaid pearl or something, or like a ball, but I don't know. It was it was a weird thing, and it was one of those things where like you haven't had, your brain hasn't developed enough to have those problem solving skills. So like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Goonies 2 were complete wastes of money. Like we shouldn't have never have rented those, but
No.
you don't know looking at the box. The box just looks like the video game version of the movie that so you're like, okay, I get this.
There was no well, Nintendo Power was probably out, but I'm guessing you didn't subscribe.
I did
So
actually.
oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah, my parents subscribed to. I actually used to have, back when before I moved and I lost everything. I used to actually have like the #1 Nintendo Power, the first one with the claymation of
Oh, I love
Super
that.
Mario
I
Brothers and
love
stuff.
that issue.
Yeah. So I actually had all of them, and I remember going through and seeing all like the weird advertisements and stuff and whatnot. But again, that was one of those situations where I was so young that I didn't really like comprehend stuff. Like I was just flipping through looking at pictures, and I would read some of the stuff, but it wouldn't like, there was no critical thinking like, oh, I wonder if I could apply this knowledge to this and actually understand what was going on. So I was literally just going off of box art most of the time and just trying to pick games from rental stores that seemed interesting.
Yeah, and some of the box art was great, some was bad.
Hmm.
Notoriously, the Mega Man box art from 1 was horrible. Uh, but I bought that game still because I looked at the back of the box and it looked completely different. And it's like, oh, you can get their weapons of the bad guys. So I thought that was the coolest thing in the world. But yeah,
Yeah.
those games were very difficult, and there was like the cheat to do the one thing that was notorious for. Your friends would tell you something that was not true, and then maybe Nintendo Power, someone would write in 1 month, and then a month later, you'd see, "Oh, I had the same problem." I mean, it was just
Hmm.
all or called Nintendo Hotline, which was something that would probably get you in trouble with your parents because it was like $2 a minute or something like that.
Yep. Yeah, I definitely did that. I think I tried to do that once, and then they needed to have a credit card, and then they realized that they were talking to a kid, and they're like, "Sorry, we can't help you." I was like, "Okay, that's fine." But yeah, no, I was the kid because I was an only child. My parents were very good about spoiling me because we were
Mm,
pretty much a dual income at that point.
mhm.
And then back in the '90s, it's like money was easy to you could afford a house very easily back then, but
Oh, yeah.
I remember growing up and my parents got me, they got me like the 3D scope one time for
Oh,
that
with
actually
the
had like the thing
eye.
that goes in front of it. Yeah, so I had that. I had like the joystick. I almost got the power glove, but I didn't quite. But they had like the Game Genie and stuff. I had that once as well too. They constantly were throwing peripherals and stuff at my feet when it was like, oh, keeps the boy busy. That's fine. Let's keep the boy busy.
He's not walking the streets. He's at
Yeah.
home. He is having a good time with all that plastic we bought him. If you have
Yeah.
not seen it, I highly recommend the movie called 8-Bit Christmas. Not sure if you saw it.
Yes.
Very good.
Very good one. I love that one.
Very fun. It's very nostalgic, but it is very. It feels like our generation's Christmas Story. You know, Christmas Story, the Red Ryder
Yeah.
BB gun is set in my dad's time frame when it was like 40s ish. Now this is
Mhm.
set in the 80s, and it's like totally everybody gets it. Not every kid could get the Nintendo. Then the Power Glove was one of those oddities that somebody knew somebody that had it, and you're like, that looks
Mhm.
amazing. And then somebody probably saw the Mario movies. So, um, well, that leads me to the thought of like what takes a hobby into something that you carry on? We call it a gamer. It's just weird because you don't call a guy who likes watching sportos or something like that. But someone that basically makes gaming part of their life, not just until they're a kid, but carries it on through the changes in life now that you're an adult, and there's a million other things you could spend your time on. But what turned you into a gamer? That was just going to be more something that was just that oddity you had as a kid where you were shooting ducks.
I think a lot of it it started very early. And there's definitely like little epochs in my history that I could point to and be like, these were pivotal moments in my gaming life. But if I got to be honest, it kind of sticks with the Nintendo, like the original NES. And a lot of it, I got to hand it to Nintendo on this, but their marketing worked. Because I remember the thing that kind of solidified gaming for me was The Wizard, which is a weird movie about a boy dealing with PTSD from his sister passing away and his parents not being able to uh, keep their family together. So you've got these kids that are just kind of wandering off because one of them doesn't know how to appropriate back into society. He can't socialize anymore. So he's just kind of an oddball. And most people probably look at that and think that there's an autism thing there. But I think it was honestly just PTSD. But his older brother scoops him up, and then they start making a trek to California for reasons. And they find out that he probably has like Asperger's, to be perfectly honest, but he's like exceptionally good at video games. And the whole thing is a decent story. It's not the greatest story in the world, but it was like the first experience that I remember looking at a movie at a theater and thinking like, why are video games not something that I'm engaging with right now? Why is this something that I'm actually just watching? And it was really fantastic to just kind of see like, oh, the thing that I like is something that other people are talking about. It's not just me and the few kids in near me that like in my block that know about this. And that's when they kind of eventually got to the point of showcasing Super Mario Brothers 3, which at the time it was released in Japan, but it wasn't something that was released in the States. And there were like tips and tricks and stuff that were being shown in this movie for a video game that I'd never seen. And I was like, this is wild. And then the game actually came out and it was like, wait, this is actually a thing that I can play. And so that was like my big Christmas gift. That was like my big want for, and I think it was like, I want to say it was like 60 or 70 bucks if I remember back in like Toys R Us and stuff. But I remember telling my parents, I was like, I just want Mario Brothers 3, please. That's all I want is just Super Mario Brothers 3 because of the Wizard. And at that point, I was like, I got to play the movie that was in the game that the kids got to do a contest on. And I don't even know what they won in the contest, but it was one of those things where it's like they're going through Universal Studios, Hollywood. There was like they were going to visit like all the dinosaurs in California. And that's why I had this weird obsession with California as a kid. It was why I loved Super Mario Brothers 3. It's why I got a tattoo of Mario in the with the Tanuki leaf power up on my back. It's like they were excited about this the way I was excited about it, but no one around me ever talked about it.
I'm just watching this trailer, mesmerized as you talk about it, because I did not realize, was that Christian Slater in the movie?
Yeah.
Holy
It's Christian
cow.
Slater.
Oh my
There's
goodness.
there's
And
a there's a lot of really good cast members in there.
is Bo
And
Bridges in that too? Is that what I
I
saw?
think, yeah,
Oh wow.
he plays the dad.
That's funny. And it's when you think about it, it's kind of crazy. Obviously, today's parents, kids are tracked, hover parents and things like that. They have to know where kids every 2 seconds. These
Mhm.
kids essentially ran away, got into contests, which like now, I mean, you'd have to have like, an adult sign your, all the stuff, travel
Oh,
with
yeah.
you. And I mean, it's not like they also had the ability to get a credit card. So where did
Do
they
you
just get
remember
available cash? Or did that, was that part of the plot?
do you remember
I've
how
never
they
seen it.
got the cash? Oh my
I've
god.
never seen it. I need to watch it. I do
Oh
need to
my
watch it.
god,
Yeah.
it's wild. So I won't reveal too much about what else goes on in there, but
You're not gonna spoil a 40-year-old movie.
well, that's okay. So all right, I'm going to sidetrack real quick. the
Sure.
idea of spoiling old content to me is just
Yeah.
as relevant as spoiling stuff that has just come out, because there's always going to be people who have never experienced it.
Correct.
And
Yep.
far be it for me to try and steal that kind of enjoyment away from someone, because I think a lot of the stuff that I've watched throughout the years are things that kids are now getting into. And it would be one of those things where it's like, I don't want to assume where people have come from in their life. But if I can turn them on to something and then not spoil it for them and have them come back and have that same experience that I did, regardless of when they did, there is that sense of like enjoyment and kind of shared experience that you can have as opposed to just spoiling it. But the one thing I will say is that it involves a casino, truckers, and a guy chasing down these children over money.
Oh,
And
jeez.
so it's interesting to see how it plays out. And there's definitely like thoughts and things in there that I don't think would ever fly if you try to make a movie nowadays. But it's absolutely like there are topics and stuff that come in there, and I'm like, they really did talk about that. How did they get away with talking about that? That's such a wild insinuation, but that, that was what movies were like back then.
Yeah, there was a lot less care for children back in the day. Kids
Mm-hmm.
could do whatever they want. And it really kind of came down to like, a lot of us grew up that way. Like my parents, I would be gone all day. And as long as I came home, everything was
Yeah,
good.
yeah. As
There's
long
no
as you
social media. Yeah.
the lights, the street lights were your warning sign. If those were on and you weren't making your way home, you were gonna be in trouble.
Oh,
And
yeah.
that was what we grew up with.
Oh, yeah. Neighbors, your neighbors were a lot closer. Almost everybody knew everybody in a
Hmm.
neighborhood. So then it was, you couldn't rely on a neighbor parent to like really not rat you out. So it's
Oh
like,
yeah,
yeah,
100%. There were so many times where if my neighbors, if my neighbors' parents had like seen me out and we were out playing, like, it was Arizona, so we had super soakers everywhere. But if they saw us out and it was getting late and lights were starting to come on, one of the parents would come out and be like snapping their fingers. They'd be like, "No, no, 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 no! You boys get home right now, or I'm calling your parents."
yeah.
And you knew that they were, because they knew the cars, they knew the phone
Oh, yeah.
numbers. Everyone had a little Rolodex that had
Mhm.
everybody's number in it, or a little book that they would open up and be like, all right, where's the Kellers? Keller. All right. Hi, Mrs. Keller. Yes, your son is still out there. I told him to get home. You should see him in the next 5 to 10 minutes. And if he's not there, we're calling the police. And you're like, oh God, if I get home and it's later, I'm gonna lose my Nintendo privileges.
Oh, my neighborhood, uh, it was so weird. I don't know why this was, but in my neighborhood, you only had to dial 5 digits. So basically
Oh,
the last
interesting.
plus the 4, which is so weird. I mean, I lived in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
So, we also still had a rotary dial downstairs.
I
So, it
forgot
was
about
pink
that.
rotary dial with a really long cable. We did not
Yep.
have a cordless phone in my house for a million years. So, if you wanted privacy, you had to go to the bathroom downstairs and pull the phone cord in. So, and long distance was a thing. I don't think people remember what long distance was,
Yeah.
but it
Anything
was very
outside your,
expensive.
yeah, at least in Arizona, I remember I never had to think about area code, but I still remember the first number I ever had, and I still remember the area code to it. And I
Mhm.
remember I couldn't call outside my zip code, or that was going to be considered long distance, and my parents were gonna not be happy.
I love the fact that my mom still has the same phone number, which is just crazy. But I also still
Wow.
remember my aunt's phone number. There's certain phone numbers that you'll never forget. And
Hmm.
then new phone numbers, like I don't know what my son's phone number is. It's just in my phone.
Yep.
So,
Yeah.
well, that leads me into probably the next logical question, which would be, what games really have meant the most to you? And you obviously talked about Super Mario Brothers 3.
Hmm.
And then, are there any favorite memories tied to those games? Because, obviously, kid, it's easier to say that's my nostalgia time frame.
Yeah.
When you get a little bit older, it's different because maybe it's with your friends and you have a certain group, and you get to a little bit older and then you have a different relationship with games and friends.
Yeah, I would say there's definitely some games that have stuck out like in my history. And I think going like chronologically, I would probably jump. next to The Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time. I definitely had like an infatuation with A Link to the Past, but that was definitely one of those Zelda games where, again, I was like at here and my brain development needed to be here. So by the time that happened, I was like over here when I finally gave it another chance. And I was like, oh, it just, and something just clicks. You try something and it works and then you go with it. And I think after that, it wouldn't be until later in life when I was actually like buying my own N64, like my first purchase of a console by myself to get like Super Mario Brothers and stuff. But it wasn't until Ocarina of Time that I would say that was when I finally fell in love with games for what they could do beyond just jumping, collecting stuff. Because I think that was a lot of like what I was, I would play like Star Fox and I'd go collect rings and I'd move from planet to planet to planet and never everything else was just superfluous. Same thing with Donkey Kong. I was just going through the levels, and Mario, I was just going through the levels. Yeah, there's story, but never really paid attention to it until Ocarina of the Time. Ocarina of Time was the first time that I had to sit through dialogue. I had to sit through like the Great Deku Tree telling me about how it was dying. I had to sit there and listen to people talking about this dark man from the desert coming in and stuff. I had to think, like all these different things were kind of like flooding into my brain and saturating it with this idea. And it wasn't until I actually like wanted that game so badly that I was willing to do anything, and I had to have the gold version and stuff. And I totally got it, and I totally got the pre-order binder somewhere around here from Toys R Us when I got to go pick it up after school when my mom drove me to Toys R Us, and I actually got to have it in my hand and I got to hold the box and stuff. And I went home and I played it, and I had like all my Nintendo powers laid out, and I knew exactly how I was going to work through the first forest and the first dungeon and stuff because I'd already been reading all the guides and stuff. And the critical thinking part of that came into play, and I got to live the story. And that story now is like one of my favorite things in video games. I love having really good stories, and I look to games for that. So it's like going from there and moving into PC gaming was really interesting because I started going from console games where I played like Legend of Zelda and GoldenEye and Perfect Dark and Donkey Kong Country and stuff like that. And I started going into like Warcraft and Diablo. And I saw my buddies playing Diablo and I was like, what is this? This is wild. He's like, this is Diablo. And I'm like, it's on a computer. And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, so you just like, what do you do? And he's like, oh, you just click around and then you click on things and then you use spells. And I was like, blowing my mind. I was like, this is wild. So I had to get a computer at that point. And of course it happened right around the time when schools were like, well, we're going to be moving away from typewriters and your kids are going to have to learn how to do computer processing with word programs. And my parents are like, oh Lord, here we go. And then my dad's like, I just saw a flight simulator game that looks amazing. So yes, we're getting the boy a computer, but I'm going to be using it too. And I'm buying a flight stick and he's not allowed to use it. And I was like, I can't wait to use this thing. It's going to be fantastic. But I remember Warcraft back in the day. It was one of those games that I picked up and I kind of started to kind of understand how to play it. And it was really interesting because it was my first like real-time strategy game. And I had no clue like how to balance units or what the paper rock scissors of the game was. I knew how to make a lot of units and then just continuously run them at the buildings until I got to the end of the map. And that worked. But I have to say, I really didn't comprehend like what that process was or anything at the time, but I still loved and enjoyed that. And that just kind of carried on until like I got into World of Warcraft.
It's really amazing, because I remember in college, Warcraft 2 was a huge deal.
Yeah.
And then, so in college, I had a really crappy, Packard Bell 486 SX, so that's like 25 megahertz. I think I had a 120 megabyte hard drive. I
Yeah.
finally got myself a CD-ROM so I could play, The Seventh Guest and some other games and Phasmagoria, I think that was what it was called,
Oh wow.
Phantasmagoria from Sierra,
Yeah.
and,
Good old
I was
Sierra.
just yeah, I mean, but I didn't have a 3D graphics card, so I was, like, trying to do whatever I could do to play games, and then, the game that really made me think, "Wow, I really need to get into a higher end PC game," was, or PC rig was Warcraft 3. I remember when that was coming out. That's what I'm kind of showing the Reforged. It just looks so amazing. And it's like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, you need an NVIDIA GeForce 256. So this is like the first NVIDIA GeForce. So it was amazing how PC did change a lot of people's. That was like the mature system. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that was like the first one where you could see questionable things. You saw lots of, Doom and Quake and all those things that really pushed the envelope. That's when PC was just dominating, like performance and things like that. But it was definitely not as widespread, but college, because of proximity to people, faster internet connections, LAN parties and things, became very feasible. And yeah, there was just a lot of RTS became a big thing. Command and Conquer. Then it was, what was
Oh,
the
I
other
love
one that was
Command
really
and
big
Conquer.
that people liked at the time? It
See,
was like the game that came after Command and Conquer. It was a big deal. Was it Total? Oh,
that's a really good question, because I stopped with Command and Conquer and like the Tiberian Sun, or like Code Red and stuff. Like those were where I was like, okay, I want more Warcraft, but I don't know what else is out there. And
mhm,
boxes and stores sold me. I don't even remember what stores they were. I want to say it was like KB Toys, which was very popular toy store
mhm.
for in my area. And they had
KB at
like,
the mall typically, right?
yeah, and they had the big glass wall that was enclosed that had all the games and all the little placards for it behind
Mhm.
it, and they would have to like unlock it and like roll it open and pull out the box, and then they'd close it up and lock it up, and they'd hand it to you after the register, and you'd be like, I have this giant box now that has diskettes in it that I have to go shove into my computer.
And the boxes were very iconic.
Hmm.
They were huge, like to your point, but sometimes there were different shapes, and they came with so much, not clutter, but it was like cool little things, a map
Yeah.
maybe, or this. And then that, I think we were probably past to get into a game, you needed like a code from like the book you got with it, because it was like piracy was really bad back in the day, so they started doing that. I think they finally stopped doing that, but it was amazing. Like we had EB game, no, it was EB Games. It was EB Games and also Babbage's. Those were the
Mm,
two stores at the mall that had a lot of console games, but a lot of PC games. And that was a big deal. And they always
yeah.
had a video in the front of the store showing all these trailers and gameplay clips for games. And it's like, this is before YouTube, folks. This is the only one time you saw something cool. You're like, oh, this is amazing. So yeah, PC gaming was a big deal, because it wasn't that big in the early 80s that really, blew you away, but in the 90s that really became, and then early 2000s became like, wow, this is amazing. So so PC, obviously that's a bigger expense. I mean, back in the day, a, a decent PC was like probably $1,500, and you're lucky whoever bought it for you.
Yeah, yeah, that was something that was completely beyond what I knew what was going on at the time. Like when I got my first PC was in 1996, and after that, I remember my mom actually worked for a or no, a Catholic religious supply warehouse, and I'd gotten so comfortable with working on PCs and stuff, with kind of like messing around. It was like Carmen San Diego and Encyclopedia
Mhm.
Britannica, but like I also had my Warcraft and I also had Diablo and stuff. And I remember my mom would take me to work during the summer to do data entry, which I'm sure was completely above board, and the money I got from it was definitely taxed.
Oh,
Uh,
sure.
so I remember like anytime I would get done with the data entry, because the people there were like, well, the kid is doing better than the interns we hired, so just let the kid do it. Um, then I remembered like afterwards, I would get to play stuff like Lemmings and King's Quest and all these games that I had no clue about like growing up. And I was just like, these are really crazy. Like I love Lemmings and stuff. And it was always, I never got a chance to like scratch that itch unless I went to my mom's job and she would like sit me down and she would let me have all the big floppies. We had the proper like big floppies, not
Mhm.
just the diskettes. And I'd slide one in and lock it in, and it would read it, and then I would unlock it and pull it out, and then put the other one in, and then lock that in, and then boot it up. And it was a very interesting time where everything was very tangible with gaming. Like everything was tangible. You had to install games physically. You had to boot up games on your own. You had to know how to do that. And you really like, if you wanted to like look something up, you had to get the box, you had to bust out the manual, you had to find the right page, you had to read through it and kind of look at the art that was in the actual manual. And if it wasn't in there, you're done. There's nothing there. You ain't got nothing. You got to figure that out.
It's really amazing. Yeah, gaming was not easy. It was not. It was very few games you got to actually buy. If you had a rental store, like you talked about, that was when could you actually get to the rental store because you probably weren't driving yet. And
Yep.
then you had like 2 days to finish the game and had to go back. And because if you got a late charge, someone was going to kill you
Mm-hmm.
because you didn't want that either. Did you ever rent a system?
No, I almost rented a Nintendo Virtual Boy. That
Oh,
was it was the one time that I genuinely considered like renting a system, and it was at a Hollywood Video, and I was talking to my parents about it, and I was like, "Well, I kind of want to try it." And they're like, "Well, have you ever used it before?" And I was like, "Yeah, yeah, I like tried it at like the Toys R Us we went to once." And they're like, "Well, do you think this is something that you want?" And I'm like, "Yeah." So and they were like, "All right, well, we'll take a look." And by the time I had like convinced them that it was like a good idea, hindsight, not a good idea at all.
no.
But at the time, like that night, like my dad's like he's grabbing like a horror movie to go watch, and my mom's like picking something else out that's like sci-fi or something. By the time I had convinced them to actually like get on board with this Virtual Boy thing, we went up to go talk to them, and I told the guy that I wanted to check out the Virtual Boy, and he's like, "Oh, we're out." And my mind was just like, and I had no
Oh,
idea that there was like quantities, or that I
yeah.
had to think about that ahead of time to check and see like, oh, before you sell your parents on this like $75 like rental period for a week, maybe, just maybe, check and see if they've actually got it in stock.
The logic, I give you A for effort.
Yeah, it was a in hindsight, I probably would have been very like nauseous or something about it. I had no clue like how that was going to work out. But I just remember seeing, because of Nintendo Power, it always had the advertisements and stuff, and you'd see them like looking the scope, and it looked like it was all 3D. And I had the experience of like Toys R Us, where I got to like look up into it and try and like see what was going on, and I'm like holding the controller as my the back of my neck is like cricking as I'm
Mhm.
trying to play this. And it was a very interesting experience, trying to see like if I could get that. And I never, at that point, I outside of like the little Toys R Us like demo units that they had, I never gotten a chance to actually play through anything for the Virtual Boy. And then come to find out years down the line, it's like, oh well, they really didn't, it didn't go far.
No, no, I believe, but well, that was the least successful Nintendo system until the Wii U came along, and
Yeah,
I think the Wii U is still more successful.
I
But the
think
good
so.
news, Logan, because you're a Switch 2 owner, you can now own your very own Virtual Boy monstrosity for $100, and then get all of those 13 games they published for it.
Yeah, it's wild that they're going in with that. I'm genuinely surprised that Nintendo's like we could have the N64 mini. We could have the GameCube mini if we really really wanted to, but
Mhm.
Nintendo's like, "Nah, I think we're going to peddle the Virtual Boy. I think that's a better buy."
I think they made this is just like an inside joke. They're like, let's see how stupid these people are. And let's see how
Yeah.
far we can push it. And guess what? I bet it's going to sell better than the original Virtual Boy.
Yeah. Yeah, they're like, "We got him with the alarm clock. Let's reel him in with the Virtual Boy."
Larmo. Oh, Alarmo. Oh well. Um, so we've kind of seen your progression of your interests. So would you say there was I mean, I think about where my interests have they've gone with gaming. Like at this point, do you feel like there was another peak in a different interest to get you where you are now, or was there a couple more? Or you know,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, most definitely. So if it wasn't for Warcraft 3, and the Frozen Throne and like the story behind that, I probably would have never picked up World of Warcraft because at the time, back in like 2004, I was working as an assistant manager for a GameStop, and I had a really good time. And it was during a time when I was probably my most immature and least responsible. So I definitely was doing a good job. And it was one of those things where I remember going through Warcraft 3, the Frozen Throne story, and falling in love with Arthas, and the whole culling of Stratham was a pivotal moment. And I was like with him on it, and I was like, yeah, we got to stop this plague. Turns out genocide's not a good thing. Probably don't want to embrace that. And I remember playing through that and thinking like, this is awesome. And I remember World of Warcraft being teased, and it was like the idea of being in the world that you had always been above on. And shout out to Blizzard for genuinely having like the best trailers when it comes to cinematic trailers. Like they just their movie quality, and they still they hold up pretty well nowadays. But back in 2004, I was working at a GameStop at that point, and I was thinking, you know what? I've seen the guys. I have buddies who play Morrowind, Neverwinter's Night. I like women too much. I am not going to be one of these guys. I'm going to go and I'm going to stick to my other games. I'm not going to, I got my Beautiful Joe on my GameCube.
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure they're really into Animal Crossing. I'm not going to get into this MMO stuff. Even if it's WoW, it's not going to be good. It's not going to. And then this trailer came out, and I was like, okay, maybe they got something here. And then I watched gameplay trailers of it, and then it was one of those things where I was like, I'm not going to do it. And then the day it came out, which is actually now's the anniversary of it. Funny enough, it's 21 years old at this point. The day it came out, I went over to a GameStop near my house, and I literally walked in. They had collector's editions on there, and I walked up to the manager and I was like, "Hey, how you doing?" Greeted him. I had been working with him from store to store transactions and stuff in the past. And I looked at it, and he's like, "So you get it?" And I'm like, "I'll just get the regular version." And then he's like, "Did you see what's coming in the collectors?" And I was like, "No, I don't care. I don't care." Because I was totally like, I was just like, this is just going to be a one-time thing. I'll give it a shot and see if I like it and whatnot. He's like, "Oh, we should check this out." And he showed me like the mouse pad and the art book, and I was like, all right, fine, I'll get it. So I brought it home. I plugged it in. I installed it, and I jumped online, and it was the first time I felt like what people feel like when they go into VR. It was the first time anyone that's ever done VR, you totally know what it's like to look up, look around, and feel like you're in a world. And that was what I felt the first time I played World of Warcraft. I ran around and I saw all the little units that I had been moving around and commanding for the last 10 years in games like Warcraft and Warcraft 2 and Warcraft 2 Dark Tides and Warcraft 3 and Warcraft Reign of Chaos and Frozen Throne. All these games where I'd been looking at all these little units from way up high. You could kind of go down low if you saw the cinematics in there and stuff. But to walk around and look up and see like a giant tree ant, or walk by like a giant like catapult and stuff, and have that like experience, it was kind of breathtaking at that point. And it was kind of wild to just sit there and be like, man, I'm in it. I'm actually in it, and I get to decide what happens, and you get to go and you meet the heroes that you played with and the stories that you followed. And it was genuinely like life changing for me as a gamer. Like that was when I was like, okay, there's playing games, and then there's being in games. And that was the first time I think I ever felt like I was truly had the agency to do what I want, but I was still in a bigger world. And that it was an amazing experience at the time.
I remember when I was in Korea, I was stationed there in 2001, 2002. The guy who lived across the hall from me, he was a little bit older. But he was previously enlisted. Now he's an officer in communications. So he ended up hooking us up somehow because everybody else said dial up. He ended up, we were in Korea. So DSL was huge in Korea at the time because obviously all of the StarCraft cafes in Korea when I was over a big deal.
Oh,
He
yeah.
was able to get us DSL because the comm squadron, he was able to get the hookup. We had Ethernet cable going everywhere. It was so awesome. And he and his wife stayed in contact by playing EverQuest 2.
Oh, wow.
So I was just on that cusp of like, oh, EverQuest 2, that's the biggest thing in the world. Nothing will ever take it down. It's huge, and Sony's got a thing, and it's like, yeah, like you said, World of Warcraft came out 3 years later, 4 years later.
Mhm.
Where's EverQuest 2 now? We'll never know.
Yeah.
And it was
Yeah,
amazing. It was a way for people to connect and live in a life together. I mean, you probably Second Life, and there was Ashran's Call. There's some others that tried to stick
mhm.
around, but yeah, everybody. I mean, even a young guy I worked with at General Mills. I remember us going on a lunch break over to Costco because one of the World of Warcraft expansions came out, and he had to get it. So I mean, I just
Oh,
knew at that point, I'm like, wait, this is a professional at a big company on his lunch break saying, we got to go to Costco. We're gonna get our Costco lunch, but I need to pick up the World of Warcraft. So, and he's a lawyer now somewhere, but it's kind of neat how that game changed so many people. And I know Joseph Moran's a big fan. It's kind of interesting to the people you find that are big fans of it and how
yeah.
much it took over the life. And it's a game now where I assume every time a new expansion or something goes out, you set yourself, you set your life apart for a couple of months and get back into it, then I'll dip out. So
Yeah.
is that still where you were at with that?
Yeah, I mean, there's it's the funny thing about being a WoW fan or just a Blizzard fan in general is I don't think that there's ever a fan that gives it up ever completely. I've been in and out of Warcraft for the last 21 years. There's been expansions that I've dipped into for a while and then I'll dip out. But yeah, it's wild to know. Like, I'll just a funny anecdote. The job that I'm working now, for the company that just recently got bought out, but the way I got this job, which was like at the time it was my first office job because I'd been working retail and service industry, doing like outdoor manual labor and stuff for years, for decades. That was all I knew. I never had an office job, never knew how to get into an office job, but I knew I needed to get an office job because I was tired of working manual labor. And the way I got into that job was when I went for my interview, the guy that I was talking to, and we ended up talking for 3 hours as this interview. But the way that I got in was doing the interview how I naturally would kind of go about answering the questions and whatnot. But at one point, they ask you those questions like, can you think of an experience where you came into a situation where you were able to provide leadership? And I was like, yeah, I used to do a game called World of Warcraft. And during the time when it was at its peak, during Wrath of the Lich King, I was part of a team that was on a server where we were the top guild in that server for the Horde. And that was part of the faction that we played on. And we were constantly working together. It was a 25-man group. We were going in, we had to be prepared, we had to understand and he's like, oh, I play that too. And I was like, what? He's like, yeah, I play World of Warcraft, so I know what you're talking about. And I was like, crazy. Okay, so you know what I'm talking about then. And he's like, yeah. And that kicked off a
Wow.
2.5 hour like conversation about where we'd played, what we did, reminiscing about old raids, talking about like achievements that we had gone into and stuff like that, and our history with it. And I came out of that with a job because of World of Warcraft and my experience with it and having those moments of working with a team, with working with as a guild leader and having to lead things and having to get things set up and timing and stuff like that, and working with people who are having trouble with bringing up their DPS or doing research on how to better DPS and having to do that kind of like growth on yourself. And if it wasn't for WoW and being a massive, online playing game, that experience would have not been present for me. I probably wouldn't have been able to get that. And it's not even the first time that I've landed a job using WoW as a reference.
That is amazing because you think about it, there's a certain time frame where, that wouldn't even be possible, right? Video games are for nerds. Why are you
Mhm.
wasting your time? Why don't you play golf? corporate
Yeah.
culture specifically. That was a big deal, even the Air Force. And the fact that you have people that have touchstones now because of gaming culture's changed. It's become more accepted that people can see where you can apply those experiences to real life. And that's amazing
Hmm.
because, what's the likelihood that that is something that would have been brought up that, "Oh, by the way, I do that too." And it's like and it's someone who recognizes the abilities and those pieces, like somebody like being really good at Destiny and becomes a Sherpa to others. And it's like, to me, that's a
Hmm.
valuable skill. Like my son, he's going to be a teacher, and that's what he does. He loves instructing people, bringing them along for the ride, making them better, and not worrying about what's going around except for the success of his team, which, that's a great skill asset because a lot of people don't have empathy. They are worried about themselves. So I love that example. That's amazing. And I love that a passion prepared you for something better, which is great.
Yeah. It's ironic too because he had given up WoW for a long time.
Mm.
And throughout the course of my time with him as my supervisor at the time, I ended up dragging him back in because they had talked about how they were going to go do World of Warcraft Classic. And he's like, "Yeah, I just don't, it's just not, they've moved on and stuff. And I don't like the way they gone." And I was like, "Well, did you hear about Classic?" He's like, "No." And I was
Mhm.
like, "Well, they're going back to the roots. They're going to kick up a server that's just going to be like the OG days back in 2004." And he's like, "Dang it. That's
Back in.
son of a," and he did. He ended up going back up.
Um, I had that experience. It's why I ended up getting into the Xbox 360 was,
Mm,
I had gone to PC and I thought, "Oh, that's where I'm gonna play." And a friend from work, we just started talking. He's like, "Oh yeah, this game Mass Effect, it's amazing." And I'm like, "Well, I tried it on
mm,
my PC, it didn't work right." He goes, "Well, I'll loan you the game and try it on an Xbox. Works great. Xbox 360 is amazing." So that's the reason I got a 360 because he said he'd loan me the game. And that just was amazing, and that also led to him. I remember, during the holidays when people were going out of town, it was the week of Thanksgiving, really dead, we got a conference room and he brought his Rock Band stuff, and we just had a
oh,
blast,
nice.
and it's and I'm actually in my company now, there's a video game club within our Teams channel. It's
Mhm.
very fun, it's actually funded by the company, so we had a Smash Brothers tournament, and it's just a great way to network and meet people too that have similar skills and also make connections. One of the guys in it, I ended up getting a Switch 2 that I ended up not needing,
Mm,
and I sold it to him for price because like he really wanted to get it. So it's kind of neat how it can create adult relationships and friendships. Which to me, as you get older, it's harder to as an adult make new friends,
yeah.
especially locally. So it's great to have those touchstones. Which leads me to the next piece. Do you feel like World of Warcraft is what prepared you for your journey into Sea of Thieves? Like having that
No,
once again. No, no? Okay, I would say
no.
I feel like it's obvious, right? Or maybe not.
So funny enough, if it wasn't, it's funny that you bring up the Xbox 360 because I was completely like, I was sold on World of Warcraft. To me, like gaming was as long as I have an internet connection and $15 a month, I'm set. I got maybe an expansion cost wise that I have to like think about from time to
Mhm.
time. But for all intents and purposes, I was fine until I went and started doing theater at a local theater troupe.
Hmm.
And doing community theater, it was really great because I was already role playing in World of Warcraft,
Mhm.
and I'd always loved theater and I'd always loved movies and stuff. But it wasn't until I got to start meeting people at a theater that I started to like go to at the end of a show you'd go and you'd have
Cast parties.
a cast party, and
Mhm.
cast parties were where someone would always just kind of set up their place and we'd all go over there. So I'd go to parties and I'd get acquainted with people and I'd start to go. And that was when I met a guy and his girlfriend at the time, Justin Ray, who ended up having an Xbox 360. And they had a Wii, but we never really touched the Wii. But we played Rock Band and we played Gears of War.
Yep.
And that was when I got introduced to Gears of War and Gears of War 2 and Gears of War 3. And that was when I was like, I don't know where I've been with this console thing. Like I had a GameCube, I had an Xbox, and I had a PlayStation 2 because of GameStop, but I didn't really like inundate. I didn't follow it. So when it went to the Xbox 360, I was like, nah, it's okay. I'm not too worried about it. And then I saw like the PlayStation 3 was super expensive, and I was like, I'm good. That's totally fine. I got my $15 a month World of Warcraft. We're doing just fine. And I saw the Wii, and I was like, I'm not waggling my hand for nothing. I don't care how good the Mario is. The Mario is not me waggling my hand. So I was like,
The
all
bowling
right,
wasn't enough to get you into it.
no, it totally wasn't. But the plastic instruments,
Yeah.
and Queen, that was enough. That was what got me. So my buddy had an Xbox 360, and he's sitting there playing Gears of War with his friend, and they're playing co-op on the screen. I was sitting there and I was like, what is this? He's like, this is Gears, dude. I was like, this is hardcore. This is metal. Like, this is where games are right now.
Chainsaws on guns.
like, yeah.
What is this
I was
nonsense?
like, dude, this is wild. So, and it was because of that. I was like, well, okay, well, now I got to get a 360. So I bought a 360 with a Kinect, and that was who I was dating at the time. They were like, okay, well, we'll get this, but I want to play the Zumba game on the Kinect. And I was like, that's fine, whatever you want. If you want Just Dance, if you
that's
just
the
want,
only person that said Zumba. I need to have Zumba.
yeah, that was if they want Zumba and they don't care about video games and they just want to play that, that's fine. That's what you get. That's totally fine. The two games that she got me was Gears of War 3, and I got the other ones, and Mass Effect 2. And those were the two games that I had for the Xbox 360, and that was all that mattered. I was like, I'm totally fine with it.
Right into 2. He didn't even.
I had no clue that the one was one. Like, I never played through 1, and by the time I got done with the Xbox 360, I never even cared about Mass Effect 3. So 2 was my experience of like, this is what choice-based games are like. This is what true like immersion into a story and then for me it was like, okay, well, this is about the story. I love stories. I've been loving stories for a very long time. So playing Mass Effect 2, that was just like, I didn't know that you could have consequences, and there were choices that you had to make, and you had to work with your crew, and you had to build out that relationship and stuff. And I'm like, they've come so much further. I'm used to walking up to an NPC, getting a quest, and then running over and killing a bunch of boars, and then bringing back half of the tusks and being like, "Where's the gold?" And that was the depth of the character like contract that I had with World of Warcraft outside of the overarching story. But every connection that you had was just another person. So having a having a connection with characters that weren't other people in the world that you talk to, and having to live with those choices that you made before I knew what save scumming was. That was a pivotal, that was like a pivotal moment. And that was what really kind of introduced me back into the Xbox world. And that was like, okay, now Xbox is kind of like in my mindset. That's kind of where Xbox is like, okay, this is where, if you're going to be playing games on console, go to the Xbox, because the Wii is going to be, it's going to be its thing. And I'm not going to buy the Wii just so I can buy the Wii U and have that weird attachment. Because in my mind, I had no clue what a Wii U was. I thought it was just a thing that you bought for your Wii, and that was it. So I was just like, oh, this is all about just like the Xbox. I understand it. I get it. That's fine. And then I got to later stages where I had to give up gaming altogether. I think I gave up gaming for a couple of years. And as I was kind of like researching, because I wanted to have something, I started looking into podcasts, and I was working outside all the time. So I needed something to listen to. So I started to listen back into Nintendo stuff. And then as that kind of like grew out, I started listening to more general podcasts and stuff. And I found Player One Podcast. And Player One Podcast was kind of my overall gaming podcast that I listened to, just to kind of get an idea of what was going on outside of just straight Nintendo. And the host of Player One Podcast, CJ Superpack, started talking about some of the games that he was looking forward to, and I started keeping an eye out on them. And I remember sitting in a Dunkin' Donuts on break one day, waiting for another customer that I was going to go visit for pest control. And I remember sitting there watching on my phone. I was just watching Twitch, and I was just kind of scrubbing through, looking. And on the front page, they had a guy that was playing a game that had really nice water. And I was like, okay, well, let's check this out. And I started watching this guy, and he's like running around, and he's got a shovel, and he's like trying to dig, and he's trying to dig in the sand. And I was like, this looks beautiful. I don't know what this is, but it looks really beautiful. And come to find out, they were actually playing Sea of Thieves. And I was watching these guys, and they were like they were climbing up the ladder to the actual ship, and then they'd walk over and they would all push the anchor up, and then they'd go and they'd drop the sails, and they'd have to angle the sails as they're watching it. And I'm like, this is amazing. Like, this is fascinating. Like, it's a world, but there's no one to talk to. It's just you and your friends, but you're just in this beautiful world in the most amazing water I've ever seen. So I was literally like sitting on my break, like checking the time, like, how much time do I have? I'll finish. I've got like 15 minutes. It's going to take me 5 minutes to get there. I got to figure out what this game is. And I figured out it was Sea of Thieves, and I immediately went and pre-ordered it at Best Buy at that spot. I was like, I don't even know what this. I'm sure it's on something. I've got a PC. I'm gonna be able to play it at least, hopefully, on the PC. And I had to go do all this research. And that was when I was like, oh, it's an Xbox game, but it's Rare. I know Rare. When did Rare make a pirate game? This is wild. And that was like my journey, kind of going from what I was used to with like World of Warcraft over to consoles, and getting reintroduced with consoles, and then finding out about Sea of Thieves.
Sea of Thieves has been around what,
10 years? 2018.
Wow, it's
March.
amazing. And I remember when that game came out, and yeah, it was kind of the reemergence of Rare being more than just a Connect character creator for all those weird Connect games. They were kind of down on their luck. They just had not found their stride, and it was amazing. But the character artwork, the look of the game was just so alive and vibrant, and just felt like something we hadn't seen before. And it was just, I mean, it was amazing though that it was truly a new type of genre, and Xbox was leading it. And that was to me was so clever. And it was it one of the first day one Game Pass games too?
Yep, it was a day one Game Pass, and I had no clue what that meant at the time. And in hindsight, it was a pretty big deal, because it was a brand new IP from Rare that they'd been working on for, I think, 4 or 5 years. And man, getting to see this game kind of like evolve over the years has been very interesting. We're watching the 2025 edition. It's funny to kind of see like how much has actually changed just with their ability to do cinematics and stuff, because it was literally like the first trailer that they had was all really just it was they don't even know how they even completed it. Basically, it was actually people playing the game and then hoping that the camera that they built to pass through caught it well enough. Otherwise they'd have to reset it all, and they'd all have to like plan out. It was like they staged it all. They had to really kind of like, okay, we're at this point, the camera's coming in, okay, now run. And they had to run over and grab a cannon and fire and stuff. But yeah, this game is one of those games that, as a fan of pirates, because I saw Pirates of the Caribbean in theaters 8 times, all with different people in different states at the time. And it was by far like the Black Pearl is one of my favorite films to date, next to like Jurassic Park and stuff. But Pirates was just one of those things that I've always just been like, this is a genre that I love. I love the romanticism behind pirates. And Sea of Thieves captures it better than most any other game that I've ever seen done. And it's absolutely amazing to be involved with that game just through content creation, especially over years, and kind of see like where things have kind of gone. And arguably, I would say that the best times of Sea of Thieves have probably come and gone, and I look forward to them kind of getting back to that state. But it's still one of those games that, to this day, I actually still have the tattoo that I got the first year. I got the Reaper's Mark, which is probably one of the coolest logos for a game, given its design and just how like there's a scene within a skull, but the skull is made up of parts of the actual scene. So from afar, it just looks like a skull, but if you come up close and take a look, you can actually see like the pirates are part of the teeth. And the rock and the ship are part of the eyes and nose and stuff, and it's just really well designed. But a wild ride that it's been, just getting involved with Sea of Thieves and being a part of that community and getting to know the team at Rare and stuff over the years.
That's really amazing. I mean, going from where you are to then doing a podcast with it and then having the connections you do with it and, kind of having it as part of your personality where WoW is probably the other part of personality, but then getting this reemergence back into console gaming because it is neat how your evolution changes. And sometimes you get brought back to certain things because you have a certain part of your existence which you need a little bit more, love and attention to. So it always
Mhm.
amazed me though with Sea of Thieves. It's so ripe for having a multimedia type of presence because it's so uh expressive and the world is neat, and because there's so many
Mhm.
stories you could tell in there. It's like Fallout, right? The world of Fallout. There's
Oh
so many
yeah.
stories that can be told in the world of Fallout. We've seen with the show. And there was, I think, was it a Netflix movie called The Sea Beast, which first
Mhm.
I thought it was a Sea of Thieves movie,
Yeah.
but because it looked just like it. I'm like, so I was hoping they would do something like that because it just seems like it fits what people would want out of this franchise.
Yeah, so I've had a lot of good conversations with the creative director who goes by Mike Chapman, as if that's not his actual name, but uh, he's a genuinely just a big fan of piracy and like Goonies and Indiana Jones. He's always loved growing up with those kind of films and stuff. And it's something that I talk to him every once in a while. We'll sit down and do an interview. And I always kind of come back with the idea. It's like, when are we going to move to film or TV? And he's always told me that it's not off the table. It's just finding the right person and getting the approvals for it. So if that was something, because they've got comics, they've done books, they've been able to do full games and stories built from other IPs within their game, which is absolutely insane. The fact that we have a Monkey Island game that
Mhm.
most people probably have never played as fans of Monkey Island, sitting in the middle of Sea of Thieves, just whenever you want, just whenever you want to go play a Monkey Island game, it is literally right there in the full completion of it. And it's got all the original actors doing their roles in it and stuff like that. That most people would never know that if you were to hire an indie studio to build what is traditionally a point and click game in 3D, that Rare managed to pull it off and exceptionally well. But it's one of the, like, the least talk about things about Sea of Thieves, which is weird. But they've always talked about, like, they want to do movies. They would love to do TV. It would be a fantastic medium to work in. But much like Hideo Kojima, it seems like they're always just kind of stuck to video games for whatever reason.
I think it's time to call up Disney, say, what's Captain Hook up to these days? We're going to make a Captain Hook focused film in the world of Sea of Thieves. Prince money.
It's funny that you bring that up, because when they did the collaboration with Disney to do A Pirate's Life, which was a full-on Jack Sparrow story
Hmm.
with Davy Jones and a cast of characters that came from the different Pirates of the Caribbean films, there was, at the very end of one of the episodes, which is kind of their way of, or my way of saying their tall tales, there was a table where a group of pirates who were called the Dark Brethren Court met to discuss their future plans and how they were going to deal with the issues of the Pirates of Sea of Thieves and Jack Sparrow. And one of the interesting things was, at the head of the table, there was an empty chair. And in the empty chair, there were burn marks on a map that had been laid on that thing. And one of the interesting things that I always kind of noticed, and I brought this up to him, and actually, it's never been explored. But if you look at the table and you take a look and you see there's two burn marks very close next to each other, which is a very odd thing to kind of have for cigarette burns in a map. But on one of the armchairs, you have a bunch of little scratches, as if someone was scratching it with like a knife or something like that on their left hand. and then or no, I believe it was their right hand. And if you go and you take a look at Captain Hook, famous, version of Captain Hook from Disney's Peter Pan, there are points where you will see that Captain Hook in the actual movie smokes from a pipe, and that pipe has two cigars, and it just kind of forks out very close next to each other. So the seed has been planted in Sea of Thieves in collaboration with Disney. Whether they'll ever get to tell that story still remains one of the most popular videos I've ever done on YouTube. But there's been enough confirmation that the quote unquote captain that was in charge of the Dark Brethren court that's outside the Sea of Thieves that has been waiting for the right time to come in could actually be a Captain Hook story, which for Disney fans would be fantastic to get a revitalization. They've always had villains and stuff that they've been able to play with, but Rare is always had this kind of trump card in their back pocket that they could pull if they ever wanted to do another collaboration and actually work it into Sea of Thieves in a very natural way. And I absolutely love them for that forward thinking process of it.
And of course, then you've got a Assassin's Creed Black Flag, which then could be another collaboration too, because I've heard that that game is getting a remaster or remake. So
Oh, that'd be great.
a lot there. So so those of us like me who've barely touched Sea of Thieves, is there a good entry point?
There's a very good entry point, actually. The first off, the barrier to entry is lower than it ever has been. You can pick up the game on sale for $20 very easily. On PC, you don't have to worry about paying for the multiplayer. Obviously, if you're going to be on console, whether you're on PlayStation 5 or Xbox One or Xbox Series X or S, you can always pick it up. And as long as you have the Xbox Game Pass or you have PS Plus, you can get into it. But going into Sea of Thieves, they have two modes. They have high seas and they have safer seas. Safer seas is if you wanted to go and sail around the world on your own ship and experience a large portion of the game without having to fear other people coming who have experience, which is the true differentiator between pirates on Sea of Thieves. Skill is where your power lies. You can't level up your ship. You can't level up your weapon. Everyone uses weapons, and it's the same as it was as day one. Obviously with some balance tweaks and stuff, but everyone's weapons are the same. No one gets a buff because they've been playing more. The only difference is how well you know the world, how well you know the tools, and how you implement them. And if you've got some Sherpas on your crew who can help handle the situation when it comes down to it, then you shouldn't have any problems for most cases. But if you just want to jump into Sea of Thieves to look at the water, to run around in an island and get accidentally murdered by a trap that you didn't expect in a tunnel that you were wandering looking for loot and treasure and stuff, and you have skeletons chasing around with you, Safer Seas is probably one of the most calming experiences that you could possibly have with yourself or kids or people that have disabilities, or just a chill session, and you don't have to think about it. And you don't have to necessarily jump online with other people because it's just you in the world getting to get your feet wet. And that's something that you don't really see too often with games, especially if they're online multiplayer. Like you have to kind of seek out other venues if you want to go and try and test things out. Most games that are shooters, they'll have like the training session where you can go in and shoot some target dummies, or you can maybe find like an island on Fortnite to kind of like run around and get used to building and stuff like that. But Sea of Thieves offers a large portion of their game through Safer Seas, which is just you on the server alone with maybe a crew that you can jump into and do whatever you want where it doesn't include other people.
That is fantastic to hear because that sounds like it's up my alley. I like that type of environment, but yeah, I think when I did play it with myself, I got ganked pretty easily. Like, oh
Yeah.
no! And then I played with Mark Carabin. He was my captain. I was just doing whatever he told me to do, and we had a lot of fun. But it was like
Yeah.
then just finding time to team up with people is obviously very tough. But appreciate that, and hopefully anybody who's listening hears that they're like, I've always been interested. check out because there's more ways to play than ever. And I would bet we're going to have that game coming to Switch 2 eventually because it just makes too much sense.
It does, especially with Microsoft wanting to put everything everywhere. It's kind of been their tester for a lot of stuff. It was the first one to be day one Game Pass. It was the first one to go kind of cross-play with different PC and Xbox games and have that buy anywhere feature. It was one of the first ones to kind of get pushed over to PlayStation. So it's always done well. It's always been really, really popular. Even if people don't talk about it or people don't stream it too often, it's usually one of those games that's like become a pillar franchise for Microsoft. So I'm surprised at this point that Microsoft hasn't gone harder on supporting the Nintendo Switch 2, just given how much more accessible the games are going to be based on the hardware set. But I would anticipate that when development kits become more popular, more easily accessible, they'll start kind of like hitting up studios and being like, okay, who wants to go first? And Rare's always been kind of good about like jumping on that bandwagon, being like, I volunteer for tribute at this point.
And it would be a return for Rare to the original home, which would be very fun to have there. Maybe you get like the Nintendo version, maybe gets a Nintendo theme. I don't know if they would do that or not, but that would be a lot of fun, wouldn't it?
I think it would be really nice to see that if Rare and Microsoft were willing to work with Nintendo to bring Banjo-Kazooie and K. Rool back to Smash Brothers, what better way to kind of bring Sea of Thieves to Nintendo with a collaboration of Donkey Kong as the original character, have like a Donkey Kong ship set. And even better yet, I'll toss out Wind Waker as like one of my favorite Zeldas. Having the Lion King ship set would be fantastic. You can kind of do it, but man, it would be really nice to have a ship set just dedicated to the Wind Waker King Lion ship set.
Maybe a Master Sword is available.
Oh yeah, I feel like that's like a must. Like you have swords, swashbuckling, all that good jazz. Let's throw the Master Sword in there as well too.
Absolutely.
I mean, we have Halo plasma energy swords, so anything's on the table.
Absolutely. You got to love it. So last serious question. What has you most excited about the future of gaming?
Ooh. Gosh, that's an interesting question because it's really hard to say nowadays. It feels like fidelity is no longer the chaser. To be perfectly honest, I'm gonna say in true to my nature at this point, but games that have really good stories are always going to be the thing that really kind of interests me. One of the things, especially with working with Luke and having the opportunities that we have with Xbox expansion passes, we have the opportunity to really kind of jump into games that are probably going to be less talked about. Everyone kind of gets access to like the Outer Worlds 2 or the Grounded 2s or the next Halos or the next Dooms and stuff like that, but not too many people are going to want to jump on Immortals of Avium or Banisher's Ghost of New Eden. Absolutely. Or South of Midnight. And over the years of working with Luke and having these opportunities, one of the things that's always been impressing me are some of the new IPs that we get, because I feel like we've gotten a flood of remakes, we've gotten a flood of remasters. Companies are looking to cash in on nostalgia. So new games that have been coming out that are fresh IPs from studios that would potentially be considered indie, but also kind of bridging that gap between AA and AAA. Expedition 33, Clair Obscur, very relevant right now, given the Game Awards and their announcements and stuff. They're stories that most people would not give the light of day, and that come from studios that may not be top bill studios worth investing in, especially considering there's a plethora of games. There's tons to pick from, and a lot of games that we play right now, we've either purchased and are still playing, or we're free to begin with. So one of the things that I've really loved is seeing when new studios come out of nowhere with a story that is well thought out, that is well written and well executed on, that can really give you experience or feelings that you don't normally get with stuff. South of Midnight is a perfect example of how pain can ravage and decimate an entire town. And it's not one baddie that is like taking over the entire world. It's everyone's little pieces of pain that are just kind of congealing into one area. And granted, there was like a natural disaster in that, but as you're kind of going through and checking on people and seeing how things are going, you start to unravel the mysteries behind who those people are and stories like that. Same thing with Banisher's Ghost in New Eden. Fantastic game when it comes to story about a man who ends up losing his wife when they used to work, they worked together to try and help people who had lost lives and lost friends and lost family members, and those ghosts were haunting them, and their whole goal was to banish these spirits from tormenting these people. And now a man has to decide, as a junior to his wife, in this job that they've got of banishing ghosts, is he willing to give up his wife, who is now a ghost? And there's a moral conundrum there of, what do I do? How do I handle this? On one hand, I could continue giving the doing the job that I was working with my wife to do, and not and banish all the ghosts of New Eden that are tormented by this general specter. Whereas the other side of it is, if I banish these ghosts, I have an opportunity to use their essence to put into my wife's spirit to then bring her back. And the moral issues, the feelings of like, should I be that selfish? Is that what she wants? Is that what I want? Is that what other people's spirits deserve by condemning them to give up their spirit and taking their essence selfishly to bring my wife back because she was taken from me? And it's such a you don't see stories like that, really. You don't really experience those in mainstream games. And that's something that I think, as a result of games like Mass Effect, games of like Ocarina of Time, telling these stories and kind of seeing pain throughout the world, or seeing how people deal with emotions and what's going on in their worlds. Those kind of tales are so much more interesting to me than just kind of the mainstream stuff, like the average everyday thing. That's like, what collaboration are we seeing come into Fortnite? Simpsons is fantastic. They've done a fantastic job of representing that world, but there's no story there. There's nothing that's driving you or forcing you to feel something, to grow as a person, to think about what others are doing with their lives, and how does that relate to you and your experience and stuff. So I think that's where I love seeing the future of games, is in the newer games, and not just the remakes and the rehashes or the free to plays or the games as a services, but who's coming up with a story and then implementing it in a way that we've never seen before.
It is amazing now where there's some people that they don't see value in story in video games. That's fine. They love the mechanics. They
Mhm.
love the act of playing. Where others people have really glommed on to great stories. And I love the fact now we are at a space where you don't have to sacrifice gameplay for a great story. We used to have like the
Mhm.
Telltale games where it felt like you were doing very little. And now we've got a game like Dispatch, which I really want to play, which
Same.
sounds amazing, where they said, no, you can have both and you can really make interesting choices. And it's putting you in a different space. And it's like, and apparently the actors are amazing. Like you've got like Gail I'm blanking on his name, Gus Fring from Breaking Bad.
Oh,
Um,
oh my gosh. He was in Far Cry 6.
Yeah, and he
Mandalorian.
was all yes, and yeah,
Uh,
he's, I
oh my
can't remember his
gosh.
name. He wa great
Yeah.
actor, amazing, he's in it. We've got, Aaron Paul from Breaking Bad too, so they kinda got brought back together, but yeah,
Yeah.
apparently the writing is amazing, the acting is amazing, and we've got this
Oh,
from a video game, quite honestly, that's coming from a new independent studio that they just sold 2,000,000 copies, so there's a space for this. The Banisher team, they made a game called Vampire. It's Don't Nod. I don't know if you ever
mm,
played Vampire with a Y. That was
no.
their first entry into doing more action combat along with their storytelling. If you liked Banishers, I would check out Vampire because it's basically you can see the progression with Vampire and then into
Mm,
Vanishers. And I'm very excited to see what they do next because they've made such a progress in their combat. It's only gotten better. Yes, that's not a great part of Banishers, but it's
mhm,
better than it was. So you can see where their craft is changing. Same thing with South of Midnight. That studio, the first game really didn't have a lot of great, what I would say, like gameplay and combat and things like that, to then go into South Midnight, where it's now
yeah,
platforming and it's the art style is amazing. So I love that these studios are growing and getting to really not sacrifice story for action or action for story. It's
yeah.
really encouraging.
Yeah, I agree. I'm very much looking forward to playing Dispatch. Just I tried the demo and I saw the humor that they had in there, and the gameplay was quick paced enough that I was like, okay, I get the idea here. I get the intent. Now I want to know what these characters are like,
Mhm.
and I think things like that, like Baldur's Gate 3, another perfect example of how you can still have really solid gameplay, but stories that are really defining with each character, and you really start to fall into that. I want to see where this goes, and for me, I respect it as for what it did, but the gameplay was nothing that I actually felt like I enjoyed, and I had a really hard time because I wanted to enjoy Baldur's Gate 3, but it's just I couldn't get past the gameplay. So it's one of those interesting things where if they had made a series of that, I probably would have fell in love with it the way I did like Lord of the Rings in that sense. But it's always interesting to kind of see like where do people go with the games, and will it resonate enough from a gameplay perspective for them to stick with the story, or will the story carry them even beyond what they would have normally stuck with because of the gameplay being so varied from what they're used to. Same thing with Hades. Hades has fantastic characters, amazing writing, but the gameplay was nothing ever. I never liked roguelikes, but I was willing to play Hades and put myself in that position because it was such an interesting game.
And that's where at a point now where I feel like more genres are becoming approachable because of one thing or the other, which really brings people to the table. Just like you said, Expedition 33. A lot of people are not turn-based game fans, and then
Mhm.
they brought into a way where the presentation now feels like a high-end Western RPG style with those unique mechanics. Where I felt like there's always been you got one or the other. You got like a Japanese, you got to really love
Mhm.
that anime or that type of storytelling, where you get this, or you get like me who loved the South Park RPG. And I love that just because I love that character of the world. It's fun, but it
Yeah.
wasn't like the gameplay hurt it. It really made it fun and really made that genre work for me. So last question, a little more fun. So with the holidays, we talked about 8-bit Christmas, that coming up. What are your holiday gaming plans?
That's a really good question because I'm actually going to be traveling for this upcoming holiday. But traditionally, in the past, Christmas has always been a new game experience for me. Growing up, I remember being super excited when I first got Star Fox 64, and I had that opportunity to get a Rumble pack. And I was like, what is Rumble going to feel like on a controller? This is going to be wild. And then I remember being completely bummed out by games like Donkey Kong Country at
Mhm.
first, and just being like, "This is it. This is all this is." I thought the Donkey Kong thing was going to be different, but no, it ended up being a fantastic game. But Christmas has always been one of those like games, like fresh game for me, something to really jump into. And it's at this point now, the irony being is that I feel like gaming during the holidays is not about the new game that you get, but going back to the games that you didn't play and using it as a real backlog time. But definitely, I remember many a holidays being that time where I'd been waiting and waiting and waiting and just wanting like the one new game that I knew was going to be the game that I wanted to really pick up and play and stuff. So things like Star Fox 64 or Donkey Kong, those were easy asks and stuff. But I remember there were definitely points where um, trying to convince my parents to let me get Super Mario World was a real task, and I had to be extra good that year to be able to get a Super Nintendo. But man, yeah, that's nowadays it's very much like, okay, are there events that are going on in the games that I'm playing? Can I go get some cool stuff during those? Or is there a game that I've been sitting on that I haven't gotten a chance to get to? So like this year, it'll probably be spending time playing Ghost of Yotai or Yote, or going and actually playing Star Wars Outlaws and stuff like that.
Love that. One of those things is truly how do you balance that family time, all those things. And for me this year, since we're going to Michigan for Thanksgiving, I'll be taking my Switch 2, staying with my mom's, and hopefully get a little gaming time in there. But it's truly Christmas vacation is my big time to shine this year because we're not going anywhere. It's going to be very chill, and I will get to just play a lot of gaming. I've got to burn a lot of vacation because I don't get to carry any over. So I'll definitely have an opportunity to not only play, yet to your point, the games that you got to catch up on, but I also have been putting together an arcade machine.
Oh wow,
So it's really getting that up and running and really getting into some arcade classics. So I'm very excited for that.
that's awesome.
Well, this has been a ton of fun, Logan.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm so glad we got to do this. This is why I'm my the new shows I'm doing are going to be a little bit more focused on the people and the things they do and just being a little more positive, putting some positivity in the world. I'd love talking about games, but I don't want to get rung up into the latest controversy. And I figure at this point it's a great time to get people to talk about, what gaming means to them. And it's been a pleasure to talk to you tonight about that.
I appreciate the opportunity. It's nice to kind of reminisce and think about all the stuff. And I hope at the very least there are people who had similar experiences. And some of these older games and stuff, we have these experiences, but we never get a chance to kind of sit down and talk about how it impacted us. And hopefully some folks out there listen to this and they had similar experiences and they got to enjoy this moment of kind of going down memory lane and, and talking about some stuff that hopefully they got to do.
Absolutely. It's those things that bring us together, a lot of commonalities, and it's good to share. And then also get to hear about, hey, you had a completely different experience, but it sounded awesome. So
Hmm. Yeah.
love to talk about these things and bring people together in the world of gaming, because we're typically just shooting each other in games. So it's good to
Yeah.
have that. Well, with that, Logan, tell people where they can check out your stuff and keep up with you.
Oh, I mean, the best thing to do is if you had any inkling in Sea of Thieves or any curiosity about the Keel Hauled podcast that I've been doing, that's easy. You can search Sea of Thieves podcast, and if it's not made by Rare, it's probably made by me. So there's probably a good chance of finding my podcast Keel Hauled through there. But outside of that, I do a show. I'm co-host with Luke Lore, the Insipid Ghost, for the Xbox expansion pass that we do every Saturday, or try to do every Saturday. And that is kind of my outlet for being able to talk about like the industry in general, in the news that's going on. Because Keelhold is a very kind of special baby for me. And it's one of those ones where it's like I just focus on Sea of Thieves there. And that's where I get that kind of fandom taken care of. But everything else always kind of falls into Xbox expansion pass. So if you want to hear more about game industry news, or you just want to hear about people who have thoughts and opinions, and you want to be able to bounce your thoughts and opinions off of that, XEP is a great way for us to kind of have a discussion about gaming in general.
You also have a great Discord within the XEP crew. Great
Mhm.
people. I'm part of that. Everybody just enjoys talking to each other, sharing, and having a lot of fun, and making fun of Luke's bad taste in food, and sometimes a lot of movies too. So
Yeah, I gave up on. I gave on. I tried my best to get him to get some good opinions, but that's okay. We can love Luke and just embrace him for the vault boy that he looks like.
absolutely. Well, Thank you so much. And folks, if you like this podcast, we'll be doing more of these. If there's someone you'd like to have me talk to about their gaming past, let me know. But in the meantime, check out the Fandom Foundry at fandomfoundry.com. We have a Discord group as well. Where we talk about everything under the sun, sports, video games, all things fun. And then we also have our socials at the Fandom Foundry across Instagram and Blue Skies, and then check out our YouTube as well, the Fandom Foundry on YouTube. So with that, folks, thank you for listening, and everybody's got a story to tell. Let's hear yours.